Thank you, everybody, and welcome to our farm. I'm AJ Carrillo, my wife Nicole, and our daughter Tallulah. We all take care of this deer tree farm and agroforest. It's a small family farm, or regenerative family farm. 18 acres, so that's a small farm, even though it's a lot for two people. It's just a small family farm, and a regenerative farm simply means that we're striving to regenerate our ecosystem. And when we're talking about regenerating ecosystem, how do you do that in an agricultural sense? First and foremost, our main goal is to build soil. That's the litmus test for how you're being regenerative. If you're building soil, then you're benefiting the rest of the ecosystem. There's something in, I see a lot of people here who know a lot about things I'm talking about today. We're talking about holistic management, talking about permaculture design, we're talking about keyline design, and basically what that is a whole systems approach to your farm. And when I say regenerative means building soil, that's what we're working with. As farmers, we're fundamentally working with landscapes, and those landscapes are based on the soil and what's growing in your soil. So we're striving to build that soil. How do you do that? Focus on our soil building practices or soil health practices. So there are 5 soil health practices. You have armor the soil, living root, living plant in the soil for as much of the year as possible, diversity of plants growing, minimize your tillage, and animal integration. So we're working with all of those tools, all of those technologies to try to build our soil. You can take soil tests. You can see how healthy your soil is. You can see your organic matter. But fundamentally, you can also pick it up and you can sniff it, you can touch it, you can see how healthy it is or how not healthy it is. You can see that the pores in it when you take a shovelful, or you can see it just run through your hands like sand, depending on the context. Our soil here, when it's not super healthy, it just becomes really sandy and just poofs away. So it's pretty obvious, and I'll show you guys different zones. We're striving to be regenerative. That doesn't mean that we're hitting all of our marks. That means that we're striving to achieve those goals. And so I want to kind of take you guys, walk you all around, show you the practices that we're using in order to achieve those goals, ways in which I observe, hey, this isn't working, but I want it to work. What can I do? In holistic management, they talk about the triple bottom line. Talk about your, in permaculture design, it's the 3 ethics of permaculture. And they all kind of overlap. We're all kind of talking about the same thing. And that basically is we want to have whatever it is we're doing, whether it's farming, whether it's business, whether it's some sort of community effort, we're trying to achieve 3 things all at the same time. In permaculture, they say it's earth health, people health, and the third one is like equitable distribution of surplus, or just, basically healthy economics. In holistic management, same sort of thing. How are our practices ecologically sound, socially beneficial, and economically profitable? Those are the 3 legs upon which the stool of regeneration sits. Okay, so it's the balance that we're striving for and we're trying to reach. And then we can apply technology to that. One of the great technologies that we have, or the great skill sets that we have, is called agroforestry. Agroforestry is basically the integration of trees in with your other farming systems. So you have animal integration, soil health principle. It's called silvopasture, where you move your animals through your tree systems, mutual beneficiality. You also have alley cropping. So if you have rows of trees, in between those rows of trees, you have other crops. It can be perennial or it can be annual. You also can utilize trees for windbreaks. You can utilize trees for riparian buffer zones. And you can also use trees for, what's the 5th one? Can't remember right now, I'll think about it in a minute. But you can integrate trees in with your system to benefit the overall health. There's a chapter in Bill Mollison's Permaculture Designer's Manual where he says, trees and their energy transactions, and that's basically what we're talking about, is that the trees have a fundamental role in our energy transactions with, they eat light, you know what I'm saying? You know, plants eat light. And that's with grass, that's with your trees, with perennials, woody, herbaceous. They're taking the abundant resource of sunlight and they're turning it into something good that we can use, whether that's graze for our animals, whether that's food for us individually or for our community. So we're utilizing natural patterns, how they occur within our specific context, that's really important, how they occur and work within our specific context. We're trying to work with those natural patterns to achieve what? To try to grow the food, fuel, feed, fiber, and medicine that human beings need, not just to survive, but to thrive and enjoy ourselves upon this beautiful creation. So we're trying to just work within that system, trying to meld ourselves back into that pattern. And that, you know, that takes time and it takes observation and it takes planning. And that's something I love about holistic management, is that planning becomes a multiple word. You know, you plan and then you observe. Am I reaching my goals? And then you adjust to try to reach your goals and then you replan. Okay, so this is not a dogma. This is not something that we just put in place and just let it go. This is a complex system that we're working with. Something that I often am reminded of is that this is not a machine. You know, a lot of times us humans really want to make it simple and easy and less work. I want that. I want it to be less work. But a lot of times we treat it, nature, life, as if it's a hard system. So in system sciences, there are two types of systems. There are hard systems and soft systems. Hard systems, or complicated systems, are the sorts of things like this. This is a complicated system. There's a series of steps that occurs so that when I push this button, it does that. And when I push this button, it does that. If it doesn't do that, then there's a step in the process that's off, and I can go in there and I can fix it and I can make it do that again. The problem is that we often treat soft systems like they're hard systems. We treat complex, living, integrated systems as if they're mechanical, hard systems. And then what we have observed over time is that when we treat living, integrated systems as if they're hard, complicated systems, we get what's called wicked problems. Okay, and that's a technical term, okay? So when you go over for a complicated system, this doesn't work, fix this, it works. If you use that same approach, oh, I have an issue in this living system, I'm just gonna fix it by doing this, boink, you know, something explodes over here and you have a huge cascading effect in those ecosystems. So soft systems are living systems, our physical bodies, our ecosystems, human economy, politics. We are natural. We are part of the natural world, and those are complex, integrated, soft systems. And so they can't be approached like a machine. So part of what I love about holistic management thinking is that, you know, sometimes people will come up to me and say, I have this piece of land. What should I do with it? And, you know, and they're thinking like, what tool should I use? Should we do pastured poultry? Should we do market garden? Should we do orchard, fruit trees? And fundamentally, the first thing you have to ask yourself, what should I do with this piece of land? You have to really backtrack. It's like, what are your core values? What are your goals? What's the quality of life you're trying to achieve? What are the end results for the future? Not even the end results. What is the future of your resource base gonna look like? Those are much deeper questions than, should I run 100 birds or 500 birds? You know, should I run cattle or pigs? You know, totally different. Those things are tools. Animals are our cohorts. They're our workers. They're our co-workers. So when it comes to looking at a small farm, looking at a landscape, looking at how we want to apply ourselves to it, we really have to start with ourselves. We have to look at our core values. What are we trying to apply, or what are we trying to achieve, and how are we going to achieve that? What is the quality of life we want to live, and how are we going to make that happen? We might have a farm, but in a lot of ways that farm has us. This farm owns me more than I own it. So how can I work with it in a way where we can be mutually beneficial, symbiotic, as opposed to parasitic or extractive, things of that nature that I think a lot of us are trying to really fight against in a lot of ways. You know, we don't just want to take. We want our needs to be met in a way that benefits the world around us. And I think that's the basis of regenerative or restoration agriculture. Those are two slightly different terms, right? So regenerative agriculture is we're building soil with our agricultural practices. Restoration agriculture is how do we achieve those goals in a way that fits into the ecosystem so much that we don't have to apply ourselves to it anymore. We get it established, and that takes about 3 years, and then it'll take care of itself in perpetuity. It's a difference between maintenance, where like this garden, I have to maintain this garden. In order to keep it healthy, I have to constantly be weeding it and flame throwing it and just doing so much, you know, I have to do all the things to it. That's maintenance because I'm trying to maintain a phase of succession upon it. Management is you're just touching it here, you're cutting this down over, oh, it's overgrown, I'm gonna throw some goats in that and then eat all the goats, and then I'm gonna throw some cows into that, and then, oh, we're gonna put some pigs over here, and I'm gonna mow it over here, and then back off. You know, you're not having to keep it going, you're just caring for it as it goes. So those are, you know, different approaches to growing an orchard. You know, one of my mentors, Mark Shepard, he wrote Restoration Agriculture. He talks about all the problems that you find with orchards comes from the concept orchard. It has to be in straight lines, has to be a monoculture, you have to have all 3-inch out of hand, grade A, eating fruit. It has to be this kind of way in order to apply to the market in this kind of a way. That's a very specific approach, and in order to achieve that, you have to kind of fight nature to get there a lot of the time. We're trying to just approach it in a slightly different way. And that sometimes means you're not going to have as beautiful a fruit. Sometimes that means you have to find other ways. Maybe we're going to process this fruit because it's kind of ugly and it's not like as big or anything like that, but we can use it for other directions. We can use it for other products. So again, that all depends on your values and what you're trying to achieve. So I just kind of want to set that up as the context for you guys. Set that up as like what we're striving for, and also say, we're still working towards that. This is not perfect. I got problems on this farm. Just like every other farmer, we have big swaths of bare dirt. We have big areas that are not doing well. We have areas that are covered in weeds. But it's a process of addressing those problems, the context, and then finding context-based solutions by applying the technology that we have, okay? So the goal in Stephen Covey's preeminent book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, second habit is begin with the end in mind. You want to, there's a first creation that happens before you have the creation in the world, and that's the one that we have in our mind. You have to plan it out. You have to create it in your mind, in your dreams, and in your heart. And then the third habit is first things first. What's that next best step? That next best step, that next best step, again and again and again. So it's a moving target because it's a complex system. It's alive. It's not a machine. So we're going to go look around a little bit. I'm going to kind of point out different approaches over time in order to make your farm successful for you and to work towards your long-term goals. Because it's a temporal system, right? I think ultimately what we're trying to do is make an intergenerational system, something that will continue on in perpetuity, something that will benefit my grandchildren. And that's got to start with having a profitable enterprise now. Because if it's not economically viable, then I'm not regenerating anything because I'm not taking care of my family and my needs. Has to be economically viable in order to be ecologically beneficial, in order to be socially beneficial. Okay, so if I have a vision in mind that is, you know, for the next 100, 200, 500 years, it has to start with the next 1, 2, 3, 5 months. Okay, so that's just a little context for you guys, just to get us started, kind of lay out the framework for you. We'll just take a little bit of walk, not too far. We're just, hey, we don't even have to go far. One of the first steps is the garden, okay? So this is a good opportunity to talk about, you know, in ecosystems. First of all, holistic means the whole, right? So we are working within the ecosystem. You hear a lot of people talk about, this is the high desert, there are the riparian zones, those are the grasslands, those are savannas. It's all part of one ecosystem. As soon as you get onto that edge between one ecosystem and the next, the lines blur immediately. You can't find where they delineate. It's because it's all one ecosystem. But it's very helpful to talk about the different ecosystems because we're humans and we divide things up, and that's what language is. But ecosystems occur in phases. So you have a bare piece of rock. How is that ever going to be a closed canopy forest? Bare piece of rock, you have little divots in it and they fill up with a little bit of dust, and you have lichens and mosses that accumulate there, and then they dissolve rock and eat the minerals. I mean, come on, sometimes that just blows my mind. And then that becomes a little bit more soil, and that develops and develops until eventually you have grasslands. When those grasslands get more mature, they bring, oftentimes, as long as the limiting factors allow for it, have trees that come up. And those trees create an open canopy so the grass can grow plenty, and you have a savanna. Open canopied, treed grasslands is a savanna. Fun fact, savanna is the phase of ecosystem that can support the most amount of animal, mammal biomass on the planet. So when it comes to producing food for humans and our well-being in general, savanna is the phase of ecosystem that is very, very highly beneficial. After that, those trees close together and you have a closed canopy forest. The soil becomes more fungal as opposed to bacterial, and you have less grass, and that's the next phase of ecosystem. So when we start with a garden, what we're doing is we go into an established ecosystem and we eradicate it with tillage, okay? So we have an established perennial ecosystem, we till it to knock it back to zero. We act as a natural disaster so that we can plant hard seeds that store well into the ground in order to grow annual crops that will produce fruit and more hard seeds within one season so that we can do it again. Only problem is that requires much toil. And so we use that and we leverage that reality in order to create short-term profit gains. Okay, so when you're establishing a small farm, a new farm, one of the first things that you can do to make immediate profit within that season is the high labor, high intensive endeavor of a market garden. Nice thing about market gardens is you have high profit margins, you can produce a crop immediately, you can establish your brand, again, economically viable, so you have to have something to sell, you can establish your brand, you can establish your business, you have a product, you can do value adding, all within your first season. So when you're developing a small farm and you're designing it, you wanna think of how you can get your profits going. Market garden's really good for that. I always just caution everybody, to learn from my mistakes. You need help to do something like that. This garden is way too big for me. I've been taking care of this with my wife's help for like 5 years, and it's just insane. It's just too much, man. And we've been doing it, and we've been having a great time, and it just gets away from you without any help. So starting small and building, if I were able to do it over again, I probably would have had my design, my business model, my business plan before I even moved over here. That would have been really, really helpful. Nonetheless, we were able to just get things rolling with that market garden. And so that's one, is using annual plants to get that succession going. In agroforestry, we can use annual plants in our tree alleys. So if we want to plant our trees and then get those annuals in there, we can get that profit margin going while our woody perennial crops are coming in, while our long-term agricultural ecosystem is establishing and growing in. Another short-term fast profit margin crop are chickens. So let's go look at the chickens. So everybody can kind of just peek in the brooder as we go. And you can lift up those burlaps a little bit, and you can see we have our brooder system. They're just, they're little baby chicks. All right. So I was mentioning how this garden, this is a 1/4 acre garden. It's just so much to take care of for one person, you know. So I cut it in half by planting this whole side under cover crops. And then instead of, you know, some of the best ways to incorporate your cover crops is to flail mow it and then do a light skim till, like 1 inch down, just to incorporate it and have that material touching dirt so that the microbes can digest it. And I just didn't feel like it. I don't have a tiller, I have a harrow, it just wasn't doing the right thing. So I decided to let the chickens do it for me, okay? So these birds are going to come in here, they're going to nibble on the grasses, they're gonna mash it down. I'm gonna bring the input of grain and feed for them. They're gonna eat it and turn it into these very convenient little fertilizer packets. Highly, highly nutritious for the soil. So they're taking my cover crop, they're turning it into fertilizer for my garden. I have them nearby, and I don't have to take care of this the same way that I take care of that. It just helps reduce my effort and my workload, while also producing a crop that will give me a product within 8 weeks. So when you're starting a small farm, that's a really excellent way of establishing a fast profit margin and getting a product quickly. You have your annual vegetables and you have your chickens. Okay, chickens, 8 weeks, those Cornish crosses, they grow fast. And if you have a good nursery setup, you have a safety, you protect from your predators, you have them with plenty of access to water, tons of feed whenever they need it, you can get a really healthy bird on pasture within 8 weeks, sometimes within 6 weeks, okay? So you have a really high dollar, high profit margin product fast, okay? So all of this is within the context of we're trying to do something larger and more long-term, but we need to cash flow it now because I got trees to buy, I got help to pay, I got bills to pay, you know, we got stuff to do. So, you know, that's a very helpful thing to have that high profit margin product. You know, profit margin is really key. If you're growing something and you can get $2 a pound for it and it takes 5 hours to harvest it, that's fine and all. But if you just move these guys twice a day, I check my brooder about 5 times a day for that first week to make, it's like, you know, every few hours just to make the little babies happy. And then once they're happy, I check them twice a day. Okay, so it's twice a day, about half an hour, and we're just rolling from there. So it's not just efficient. Efficient is how can I get as much stuff done as quickly as possible. Efficient is good, that's fine, but what it is it's effective. Is what are the few things I can do in order to eliminate the next 12 things? What's the one thing I can do, the one decision I can make to eliminate the next 20 decisions? And so I haven't been doing animals for a really long time, but I really am appreciative of them. They are our workers, they're our helpers, they're turning things that I can't eat this. I wish I could, it's so pretty. I can't eat this. But the chickens, the cows, the pigs, the sheep, they can, and then they can turn it into something really good immediately. Fertilizer, you can smell the fertilizer, the goodness. They turn it into something immediately, and then they can turn it into something highly profitable down the line, pretty short term. They talk about with you know, animal rights and everything. These are very happy animals. They talk about one bad day. Most of the time, it's like a couple bad hours. It's really not bad. You know, these animals have a really good life. We butcher on farm as much as we can, and when you get the hang of how to do it, it's like a bad moment. They're just kind of like, oh, what's up, bro? And then it's over. You know, as long as you know how to hit the off switch correctly, that's the goal. The chickens, there's a slice, and the goal is, how do we get to that off switch as quickly as possible, as humanely as possible, as lovingly and respectfully as possible. Okay, so that's part of our core value set, right? And so we're trying to achieve that while also making some dough. Okay, we also have laying hens. Laying hens are not as high of a profit margin, but they are extremely beneficial in producing soil health. Okay, the concentrated manure. It's all right. Come on, Milo. Come on, buddy. You have your concentrated manure that you have the opportunity of spreading out evenly across your property, across the landscape. High concentration, it'll get things really kick-started. So, you know, you can also do things in a highly efficient manner, and then we just have them in the garden nearby. I can watch out for them. I really appreciate that. The trick with them is this netting. It's just a tool, and you have to learn how to use your tool. If you get so you see these posts right here, they have a stake on the end of them. If you get that stake into that net, you're burning time after that. You're just gonna blow through a few hours trying to get it untangled. If you know, basically you're not rolling anything, you're folding. So I grab a post and I wrap it, and I grab the next post, and there's two posts and the tips are together, and I have them all there, and that net is laying out. And then I fold to the next post. So it's a series of folds, and then when I have this nice big bundle, it's like you kind of gotta get your arm strength on to hold it like this or something, so that it's not just, you're not having to grip it so much. You lay it down and you roll it from the net towards the posts, never getting those posts into the net. And then at that point, it's extremely efficient and really a great tool for keeping your birds in and protecting them from wildlife and protecting them from predators. Electrified, the whole 9 yards, really good one. So we're gonna be raising turkeys this year in netting with what I fondly refer to as our gobbledygook, which is their roost that I can roll from paddock to paddock, okay?
Is it hot right now?
It's currently not hot because it's touching a lot of grass. They're right next to the house. They're inside of a deer fence, and we have our dog on property. So if this was out further in the pasture, it would be whizzing hot. So we have our chickens, we have our annuals. Those are our quick crops. Now we're gonna go look at our cows, our pigs, and move out to the agroforestry system where we have our trees planted, and then we'll wrap back around and we'll keep on having conversations and talk about those things.
You have enough on drip tape?
No, we just we'll be moving. So this whole garden is under our overhead lines, and then we have drip headers as well. They're a sub header from our main header. So each drip header can water 10 beds at a time, or we can water 2 lines of overhead at a time. I like the whole garden to be under either one. So we have that lower section and that upper section are gonna be under drip, but because I'm doing cover crops over here and I'm trying to get them to grow up good and then to germinate, Milo, come here. Germinate them quickly and then get them to grow lush, nice, quick, I like the overhead for that. So, but for our tomatoes, for our flowers, for those kinds of crops, especially our summer crops when it's really hot and windy and brutal, drip is really, really effective and really helpful. So I just like having the ability to do both, a little bit of flexibility. Cool, so we're gonna walk down to the, through that zone over there and wrap around to the bottom where we're gonna see the cows, talk about the cows, and then talk about the pigs a little bit too.
Take your birds to clear out an area like this.
You know, they're never gonna get it fully cleared out just because they're monogastric, so they're not grazers. And so I'll let them be in here for probably another week. and then I'll go ahead and mow the whole thing.
Oh, really?
I'll mow it, and then I'll sow it in buckwheat.
And what is that crop, by the way? Was it
It's a winter rye.
winter rye? Okay, so
We're just gonna take a quick moment. We'll talk about the pigs a little bit. We'll talk about the cows a little bit, and we'll carry on from there. These pigs that we have over here are coonies, Idaho pasture pigs, and Mangalitsa's. Our primary kind of genetic traits are grazing hogs. I want to be able to move them around on pasture and try to reduce the amount of pure destruction that the pigs will wreak upon the landscape. So you'll see a lot of the like squat nose. That's to keep them. That makes it so it's harder for them to root and to dig up the ground. The Idaho pasture pig. So coonies are Oompa Loompas. That's all there is to it. All right, they grow really slow, they're super fat, and they're really sweet. I don't mind my little baby being around them because they're just adorable. When you look at it as an economic opportunity, they're very slow growing and there's a lot of fat. There's not a whole lot of meat, and you're gonna have a smaller profit margin for your return. So there's a balance in how you raise your pigs. I'll show you the other pigs in another method. These guys are in the nursery right now, and we often use them at the end of harvest season. We'll run them through the orchard to clean up our orchard. So we're not gonna have any of those, we're not gonna have brown rot, we're not gonna harbor pests and disease over winter. We're gonna feed it to the pigs, have a nice little bit of peach finished pork for the winter time. Okay, so a really nice opportunity there. If you're gonna get larger pigs that root a lot, they're ecological resetters. That's their job. They go into the woodlands, and they root it up, they kind of like tear it up and get all of those seeds to sprout. They reset. So you can use them to reset ecosystems. We are in what's called a brittle environment, all right? Brittle and non-brittle. A non-brittle environment has humidity spread out throughout the year evenly. So you could get 20 inches of rain, but if that humidity is spread out evenly throughout the year, you'll have a nice lush environment. We are in a brittle environment where we have humidity in specific times, and then we don't have humidity for large periods of time. Pigs are really hard in brittle environments, so you have to be careful how you use them and how you apply them. And it's not just like them eating. It's just they like lay down on the ground with their boar bristles and they stand up and everything's dead. So you just gotta be kind of careful on how you use them. And, but they're a really, really effective ecological resetter, and you can also use them in a deep mulch method. So I'll show you guys the deep mulch method. These guys are in that, this is their nursery, so they're not really rotating around like they usually do. So pigs are another cohort, another worker of ours in that way. They're our garbage disposal. We have a catering business. They get all the leftover wedding cake. We bring buckets to our events, all the scrapings, all the extra sangria. That's when piglets get made. And so, so they're very, very helpful. They pay their rent very nicely. Then we have our cows and our sheep. We just butchered all of our sheep. We had Icelandic sheep that we rotated around throughout the winter. Ruminants are just magic. They're just soil magic. They're land magic. They apply their life applied to the soil in a good way will help invigorate the health of your soil. So we're using these guys these are my girls. This is Ursula and Ariel, and two young heifers. They, I thought they were going to be feeders, but they might be breeders. I love them, and we're using them to rehabilitate the land. So they're mowing for us, and again, they're turning that grass that we can't eat into beautiful fertilizer packets that they distribute evenly across the landscape. I'll go into each new paddock and I'll throw seeds onto the paddock. So as they come into their new zone, their hooves will just step and walk in those seeds and get that new crop established into the ground. When we are in those dry periods, their urine will help keep that microbiology alive in the soil, and so they have a myriad of benefits. And then after they've been here for a while, they either make more cows or they make wonderful beef. So it's another high profit margin product while being ecologically beneficial. Okay, you can use them for all sorts of benefits. One of the problems we have is bare soil, so I like to feed them hay throughout the winter. I throw seeds down, throw that hay down, they eat it, they pee and poop on it, and then they leave that hay behind and cover and armor the soil. So again, 5 soil health principles: armor and protect the soil, animal integration, living root and plant in the ground as long as possible, diversity of plant, and minimal tillage. So these are all ways that we can achieve those things, okay? While we're here, we'll also look at this orchard. When you look at it as an orchard, it looks kind of trashy. We had a really rough October with that big frost. We lost a lot of limbs. We lost a lot of trees. They're old ladies. They've come a long way. God bless them. We lost a lot of fruit. The buds formed over winter, so we lost a lot of buds before they even got a chance to go, and then we've had some frost this year. So as an orchard, we're gonna have a loss there. But these are also trees growing on the ground and planet Earth. So they're providing ecological services. They're providing ecosystem services. They are taking the sunlight and the air, and they're taking that carbon out of the air, and they are putting it into the ground through sugars that they exchange with the microbes. They are providing shade and windbreak for our garden and for our animals. They're providing some forage for the animals. So there's a lot of benefits that are coming from having these trees in the ground. I could prune them and then flail mow all of those prunings and incorporate that carbon into the ground in a very stable way as well. So you have lots and lots of benefits just from having these trees in the ground, just as trees. The crop itself is almost, if you look at it that way, a bonus. So another kind of a paradigm shift when we're looking at the regenerative context, as opposed to simply a profit margin is number one and the only goal and the only end. That the profit becomes like number 3. You know, it's like very important, but it's not the only benefit that we're receiving from these crops, okay? So we're gonna walk a little bit longer. We're gonna see the pigs, and then we're gonna go ahead and go back to the agroforestry system. We're gonna look at how we've changed the hydrology. From here, you can see the furrows. This is just good old classic furrow irrigation. We water with gated pipe from the top, and we just use the gravity to get it to the bottom. So that's what we're doing to water this pasture and these trees, and we'll continue to kind of look at it and talk about it from there. So follow me. How you guys doing?
Good, how you doing?
Good, thanks. So this one's the Idaho pasture pig, that spotty one closest to us, and she's got a nice mix.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So we'll just look at these guys real quick. So this is another approach for how to raise your hogs. This is what we call the deep mulch method. You get some 3-foot cattle panels, and you just find a bare piece of ground, or you find a piece of ground that's just overrun with weeds, and you just apply the pigs vigorously. The big trick here is you need a lot of carbon, what we fondly refer to as their carbonaceous diaper. Okay, as soon as it starts to smell bad, as soon as it starts to stink, that means you have too much nitrogen, just like your compost pile, and you need to balance it with your carbon. So that's what we do. We have these big piles of wood chips over here. You can get them from Pioneer Sand. They're contaminated wood chips, where it's like they have some dirt in them. You know, you can get contaminated wood chips for $7 a yard. And so, I mean, I've called every tree company in the region, and no one will come over here. I'm right off the highway, and they're just like, they don't even return my calls. So I know it's ridiculous. So I just get that stuff from those guys, and I just put a big old dump load. These pigs will always have a bathroom. You'll always be able to find where their toilet is. It's right here. So all I have to do is put a big dump tractor bucket full of wood chips right here, and it will balance out that nitrogen. You'll eliminate the smell of ammonium, and you'll help it digest. When I'm ready, when they're ready, we'll move them to another piece of bare dirt. We can either leave this here to have covered the soil, or we can pile it up into a nice big compost pile and spread it around on our trees next year once it's had some time to digest. So another approach. These again are kunis. This one that looks like a sheep is a purebred Mangalitsa, and that spotty one in the corner is an Idaho pasture pig, IPP, which is a kuni crossed with a Duroc. So you're using an Oompa Loompa and crossing them with Hogzilla to get this guy. Okay, so that's what these guys are doing, and they are Milo's favorite friends. So we're gonna carry on a little bit further and go look at the agroforestry plantings.
AJ, remind me what a flail mower looks like. I can't picture it.
It's basically, instead of having a blade that are horizontal, you have blades that spin vertically in multiple directions, like this.
Looks like a rototiller?
It's kind of like a rototiller, only it's blades and they never hit the ground. So all of this just gets turned to smoothie. Or
Does it chop up everything and make it
nice and fine. Yeah, it turns it into a green smoothie completely, and so it really increases your rate of decomposition. And you can get, you know, I have one for the cover crops and stuff, and so I can turn it into green smoothies, or I can run it through big heavy duty ones and turn all of that wood into chips.
Oh, it'll actually do work.
Yeah, big size ones.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
like ones that are like on the back of your PTO, industrial size. Yeah, they're heavy duties.
So the normal flail mower does not use it. It must use a PTO. It's so-
Oh yeah. No, it's just a matter of different sizes. So some of them are like designed specifically for your like corn stalks, and that's not going to be the same grade as the ones that are like orchard flail mowers specifically for prunings.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Flail is nice because it cuts it up so it's ready for decomposing.
Quicker decomposition. When we're in a brittle environment like this, really hard to get carbon to decompose.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You need moisture eating.
You need, yeah, exactly. So if you can just like chop it into finer bits, it really helps kickstart that.
My other question was, I noticed both of your hog pens have like a barrel
Yeah.
with something plugged in the side.
Yeah.
Like a aftermarket, just plug it in and you've got a water.
Yeah, it's a pig nipple. It's like a
Okay.
giant gerbil nipple. And the fittings that go on the back, they don't sell them with them. It's like plumbing fittings,
Oh,
like
okay.
like for your sink fittings.
Right.
Yeah, and so you can just cinch those down, and
Called a pig nipple.
it's called a pig nipple. Right this way, you guys. I just kind of wanted to bring you back here. We can end on this note over here. You guys are welcome to, you can walk back with me or you can drive back from here. But I just wanted to show you a different approach to watering. This is not the only approach. This is not even necessarily the best approach. This is just another option, another approach. And you can see it. You know, if we look out here, what we're seeing are curves that start over on the east side over there, and then they slowly curve and then slope up towards the valley. So every landscape, we have a valley and we have ridges. So we're up on one ridge, and then we have this draw, this valley down here, and it comes up onto another ridge. When you have rainfall or precipitation or water fall onto a landscape, the water is going to go downhill. It's going to go 90 degrees from contour, always. That's a natural law. So we can rely on that, and we can work with that. So with French drains, you see you go on contour, and then if you want it to go this way, you go 1% this way. Want it to go this way, you go 1% this way. And you can choose which way you send your water. Not everywhere in the country really understands this. In Colorado, we've been doing this for hundreds of years. Okay, so we have a little bit of a advantage over a lot of other folks who don't necessarily know how water works. This is another approach to watering where we are seeing where the water comes from, and then we're choosing to move it across the landscape in a way that's slower, and we'll spread it out evenly out across the landscape. And this comes from a technique called keyline design. Keyline design was developed by P.A. Yeoman back in the 50s over in Australia, another brittle environment. And his goal was to, how do I get that water spread out evenly across the landscape that I'm farming? The way that you do that is you find what's called the key point. So if you have a landscape, you have a slope right here, and then it flattens out, there's this special spot right there. It's called the key point. It's called the inflection point, where the direction changes in that landscape. If you can identify the key point of a valley, and then you draw a contour line out from that valley, whenever you get precipitation, it'll get caught in that line and spread out. Then when you make another line parallel to that line down the valley, it will naturally pitch out toward the ridge. Each time you go down, it'll pitch naturally. Just the geometry works out that way. If you're on a ridge, it doesn't do that. Instead, you have to start at the bottom. You find a ridge reference point, you go to the bottom, and you parallel up. As you parallel up, it'll naturally pitch back towards the ridge. Okay, so it's a way of getting the water where it naturally concentrates in your valleys, the wet point in your landscape, and spreads it out towards the dry ridges where you would not normally have your water. So it's a method of spreading your water out evenly throughout the landscape. Australia is a very simple landscape because it's extremely old. So it's been eroded for a long, long time. It just feels ancient. And so it's a very simple landscape. You only have third order waterways in Australia. The Colorado River is a 17th order river. We live in a newer, highly complex environment, and keyline design doesn't work as a dogma. You have to look at those patterns in a context-specific way. So that's what we did over here. We don't get a whole lot of rain, and we also have deep percolation, 2 strikes against us. So we're looking at where the water comes in for our irrigation water, which is at that northeast corner of the property. And then what we did was, instead of having that gated pipe at the top of the property going downhill, we did this. We turned it sideways and let that gated pipe go downhill, and now we're sending the water this way, and it's going into these swales, which I marked out with a laser level and a bunch of flags. I took 2 pieces of rebar and tied them to a piece of rope that was 21 feet apart. I put a flag in the ground on my line, stake it in, and then I walk it out 21 feet, make a big half moon, and then I do it again in 25 more feet, make another big half moon, find the tangent, and I know I have parallel lines. That's how I paralleled this whole field. The reason I paralleled it is so that I could come in here with machinery, implements, and systematized grazing. So I can come through here with my mower, go up and down, mowed. I can come in here with my sheep netting, 2 panels wide, the rest of them long. I can come in here with my chicken tractors, 2 chicken tractors wide, move them evenly across. So it's designed, right? It's like, again, what are your values? What are you trying to achieve? What are your goals? And then you can design it to meet your needs. All of these tools are set up that way. None of it's dogma. Same way with keyline design. An iteration of keyline design is called the masterline system, developed by Mark Shepard, where he was using those patterns by P.A. Yeoman and just adjusting them for more complex environments in order to suit everybody's needs wherever you have them. So this line right here, this is the lowest point of this continual line swale, which goes up into the valley and then all the way back towards the orchard. So the water starts up there on that gated pipe. We flood it, and it flows at 1%. Mind you, 2% is white water. So 1%, nice gentle slope, very, very little erosion, if any at all, starts up there, slowly makes its way across. As it flows through this is a berm, this is a swale, this is a ditch, this is a hill. as you roll down the swale, it's watering all the trees I planted, plums, apricots, cherries. I tried some chestnuts and hazelnuts. They don't love it here, but we're working with it. The nice thing about plants is that they're like plastic in your hands. If you can get one to establish, 3 years it takes to establish a tree. If you can get it to establish, it will tap in, you will be able to get it further. If you can get it to survive, you can get seeds off of it. If you can get seeds off of it, you can breed it. If you breed it, it's locally adapted. If you do that 2, 3, 4, 5 times, you have a bioregionally adapted plant. Nice thing about chestnuts is they are a staple carbohydrate, brown rice on a tree. Nice thing about hazelnuts is they are a staple protein and fat supply. Hazelnuts and chestnuts together, you have survival food, staple food. You can live off of that. So that's why I like them. I'm still working on it. I'm not convinced, but I'm working on it. So we're working down here. We have our service berries, we have our raspberries, we have all these sorts of good stuff. It comes up into the valley. So we worked from up on the ridge, and we went at 1% down along and into the top of the valley. When we're high up in the valley like that, we can then turn that corner and slowly come downhill from high up in the valley to lower down on the ridge. And that's how I'm able to get water up here. Look how green this is. I'm able to get water into this extremely dry part of our landscape, and we have plums growing on this. There's a plum right there. There's raspberry canes in here. This is sandfoin. This is alfalfa. You know, I can graze my animals in here, and that will extend out the fertile zone. And I can push it and push it and push it over and over and over again. So it's a method. Is it the best way? Again, I'm not convinced. It's an experiment. I have the opportunity to do that. What are some other options? You can make a raised bed. Come in here with a triple shank keyline plow and deep cut it to help water percolation. You can run your animals on that. You can plant your trees into those deep rips. You can make a raised bed, and that can be your swale, and you can mulch the snot out of it with all the wood chips that you find. You know, there are lots of different approaches. This is not a dogma. These are tools and technologies that we can apply in different ways. So that's that. If there's anything that I can, like, you know, encourage for folks who are starting small farms and trying to design them to meet your needs, first identify what your needs are. Again, quality of life statements. And then look at your context. What is the 20-year low temperature? What is the primary wind direction? What is your soil type? What are the ecological concerns that you have? What are your finances? What is the future of the resource base that you have? How do you want it to look? Do you want clean water flowing through your rivers year-round? Do you want lush, abundant, diverse ecosystems? Do you want the opportunity to take your little children on a walk and not have them be covered in prickly things? You know, you start to think about those things, you identify them, and then once you have those things identified, then you can start looking at the tools that you can use and how to apply them. It's a lot of diversity, a lot of opportunity, a lot of options. It's not cut and dry, but you know, Bill Mollison, the grandfather of permaculture, used to say, we are overwhelmed with opportunities. And so that's what I'm seeing, and I hope that you guys can feel, just if nothing else, just encouraged and excited to be growing in our ecosystem and to be giving it the best shot that you can give it. And I look forward to all of us working together, helping each other out. You know, if we don't hang together, then surely we will fall apart. So I would love to just take a few minutes, if you guys have time, to answer any questions you guys have. And before that point, just thank you. Thank you guys for coming. Thanks for being here. Appreciate y'all. Yeah. Milo loves clapping. Oh, it must be my birthday. Does anybody have any questions I can answer? Yeah, Greg.
You're talking about, I mean, I understand being 20 feet or whatever width you want.
Yeah.
How do you match that with keeping the slope?
Yeah. So what
I mean, you can't have an even slope and even berm.
That's exactly right. So on a contour map, you see how they go big and then small. So the way that I adjusted for that is, as you go up, every time you come parallel up, the end point where, so I measure them so they come around at 1% and then they end on contour. So I measure it so that before it gets to the bottom of the valley, that last 25 feet of that land, of that swale, is going to be on contour. Every time I parallel up, it gets shorter, right? Because it pitches back towards the ridge. So that swale gets shorter and shorter and shorter. So I just end it, whenever it ends on contour, I stop it, and I let it get shorter until it's too short. Basically, I have a, you know, if it gets to the ridge, then that's as far as I can go. Then what ends up happening is that 21 feet, I just fudge it at the head of that swale. I make that width a little bit bigger, and then I have a little bit more slope to shoot, and I can absorb that. I can absorb it, you know, where I have a larger gap here, and I can shoot and make it steeper, and then I have the gap between swales is never smaller than 21 feet, but often it is larger than 21 feet, so I can absorb that. So there are 3 distinct zones within this whole field, but you can see like the 4th one up, you can see it stops kind of short, and then it goes another 3 and then it stops short, and then it goes another 2 and it stops short. And so it was a way of just kind of fudging it as I go for exactly what you're talking about, so that it can flood, but will end on contour. So, great question. Did that make sense? Yeah. Okay, great. Anybody else have any questions?
I do.
Yeah.
Will you graze off these alleys?
Yes, absolutely. So when it comes to grazing, the main trick is just where are you putting your fence? So with the sheep, I put my sheep netting right up against my trees. Those sheep get everything inside of the alley, but they never touch the trees. My cows, I will have that single strand, but you know, if I want them to graze this, but I don't want them to graze this, you just have to observe and figure out where that post goes so that they can reach right there, but they can't get past it. So I have some zones where they'll eat all of the apple leaves just like a foot over the fence and under the fence, but they'll never get the stem. So and those trees can take a lot of abuse. They can really take a lot of abuse. The nice thing about it is once those trees are established, you can run at least the cows, you can run the cows in with your trees for a period of time. You just have to really observe the signs for when it's been too long. When it's like just like 1 or 3 tattered leaves left, it's time to move the cows. Yes.
Sorry, are you planting in the swales or the berms or the space in between?
It's a great question. So we are flooding the bottom of the swale, and so I don't want to plant my trees there because it'll drown them, right? This is kind of riparian zone. This is high desert, you know. This right here, it's kind of the sweet spot. So so right in between the two, that's where I want the crown of my trees. So my roots are going to be fully in the wet zone, but the crowns of the trees will never be submerged. So that's how I chose to do it. I have a friend who planted right here. So he planted up. I didn't really want to do that because then your water has to use capillary action to come uphill. So I just prefer it to be right here, and then their roots are in the water, basically. So in this environment, it depends on your environment. My mentor has a client down in Louisiana, and they do swales and berms because they're in a bog, and they need the berm so that they have this much dry space to plant into. You know, if you get absolutely no rain and you're completely dependent on your precipitation, definitely plant down here and just dump it full of wood chips. We have a friend in Boulder who has no irrigation water, and that's how he does it with pretty darn good success. When you have, and then it's all variables, you know, when you don't have a whole lot of moisture, you want to give yourself a little bit more space between trees so that they don't outcompete each other and use up your water resource. If you have a very tight planting and it's a drought year, and you're working with seedling plants, thin your plants out so that they have a little bit more room to breathe and a little bit more water to drink. So, but myself, You can see here's my raspberry cane. Hasn't come out of dormancy yet. We'll see if it does, but you can see it's right on the edge of our green zone here. So the roots are in the wet zone. I could have planted it a little lower since it's so dry over here, but basically that's the goal, is right in this zone. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
What do you recommend doing with steeper slopes?
I mean, this pattern applies with steeper slopes. It's just a change in the technique for building your swale. There's a swale cut and then there's a terrace cut. So we used a 6-way dozer blade. So it goes like this, it goes like this, and it goes like this. So we use a 6-way dozer blade, and you just stick that corner in right there, and then you dig it in, and that's what makes that berm. It just replaces your swale and puts it onto your berm. And with a terrace cut, you cut it like this, something like that. So you have a flat zone that you create, and that creates your bigger berm downhill. So it's just 2 different cuts. So if you're on a steeper slope, it's called a terrace cut. Yeah, you bet. So the question was, have I ever like poked some holes into the berm to see how much that water's percolating through, or does it go straight down? With our particular context, with this type of soil, we really have a lot of percolation. And so one of the big ecological concerns we have is deep percolation. We have approximately 8 inches of topsoil, and then it's about 120 feet of salty shale. And so when we dump a bunch of water, what ends up happening is we can get it as far as we can, and it just goes down. And once that goes down into that salty, selenium-filled subsoil, it's super gravelly, we pretty much lose it. It's out, picks up that salt, dumps it into the river. Sad fact about the area is that our 2% watershed contributes to about 70% of the artificial salinization of the Colorado River. So it doesn't have a whole lot of percolation that way. In a high clay soil, you get a big bubble underneath the soil. You get this big old, I forget, it's like not a water bloom, but something like that. So it has this big old bubble underneath that goes downhill and under, and those trees will get fully tapped into that and have a full reservoir. We don't really have much clay here. So the best thing I can figure out to do is to create as much soil health as quickly as possible, because as many of you know, soil health is basically a biological sponge. If we can get that 8 inches and turn it into about 18 inches and just get it as chock full of organic matter and life as possible, then that water will hold in that zone for much, much longer. It will be resilient to drought. It'll be able to absorb floods, much, much more resilient system. So the ultimate goal is, again, like we started at the beginning, is to create soil health. If like what I saw it the other day, it's like whatever the question is, the answer is soil health. You know, the benefit of soil health is it has a cascading positive benefit. There's P.A. Yeoman, Keyline Design, has his scale of permanence. Very permanent at the top, least permanent at the bottom. At the top you have climate and landforms and water and buildings and roadways and subdivisions and trees. At the bottom you have soil. What that means is that soil is extremely easy to degrade. It's extremely easy to destroy soil. The other side of that coin is it's actually pretty easy to build it. So it's not too hard to make it healthy. It just takes a lot of concentrated effort. And so that's the hopeful side of that. To see a changing climate says a lot about what we've done to our soil. I heard it said that every year our civilization moves as much soil as was moved in the last ice age. So minimal tillage, that's where that soil health practice comes in. And so, you know, we did tilling on this property because when we got here, this had once been a pear. That's a big old pear tree right there. We got apples all over the place. It used to be an orchard. They ripped them out and they left about 400 2.5 foot deep holes. So we were like, we can't water this. I don't know how to do this. I can't graze my animals. So we went in with some tillage. We disked it, we planed it, and then I did all of that measuring from there. So it's kind of one of those like necessary evils in order to just get us going. But from there we can build it up. So, anybody have any last questions before we break?
How do you keep your prairie dogs out?
I haven't had any prairie dog problems. I have those whistle pigs, and the whistle pigs just love the rock piles. With the prairie dogs, as far as I don't know why they're not here. They're across the street from me, but I haven't had any issues with them. So I have no idea. As far as I can tell, the best thing we can do is preventative by getting as much grass growing back here as quickly as possible. But until then, I'm just gonna keep on sending Milo around to chase them off, I guess. So, but yeah, I'm not sure why they're not here yet, and I hope they don't come ever. Well, thanks again, everybody. Really appreciate y'all, and I hope you have a great evening. All right, thank you. Clapping! Oh, yay!